Also, like about the divine twins, it is very interesting that you have Horus that symbolizes Pharaoh, and also he carries both in his eyes the blessings of Thoth and Ra because of his mother. But in some legends, he has a brother like Konsu, or even Konsu can be considered his son in another legends, that he is the moon god. And it is interesting that he was also revered very much for the pharaohs as giving counsel. And also, he was a warrior god as well. And you see him like in Moon Knight in the Marvel's comics. He got popularized very much because of it in modern pop culture. Konsu.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Like that, then the sun and the moon are then working together, I guess, in a one person or as two figures in a myth, which is kind of then symbolic of that coming together also like within the individual, but also interesting because a lot of the time it is like divided by the sexes, like that sun is masculine and moon is feminine, but it can sometimes it's like the complete opposite, but really what it is that there is the sun and the moon in both the men and in the women.
For example, an interesting part I just noticed is that Khonsu means the traveler, and you have the moon doing orbit around the sun and going around more than the earth, like it moves more than the earth because it moves all the time around the earth, and the earth moves around the sun. And you have the sun moving the last. So Horus, in some etymology, it means the one who sees upon the observer. So you have the one who sees with his eyes and the one who travels with his body the distance. And they could be also the same person in the end, in different faculties. That would be an interesting approach, I think.
Yeah, and I think like Jung had said in like Man in his Symbols, but also in other of his works about the divine twins and like these kind of figures that they kind of represent the same person, but in the different faculties, different sides. And I think it's interesting what you bring up here also with, I guess, the body, and it brings me back to like Ptah too, because Ptah is also connected to like fertility, but also to the body, and I think like that the Egyptians really got that right too. It's like they were still connected to that. It's not just the land, but also the body, and these rituals that they did as well regarding that. And I guess they really were I guess honoring their temples, you could say, in some sense.
Yes, and they also cared so much in order to preserve their vigor in life and their body in death that they developed very high coronary, medicinal, and taxidermizing skills. Like they could tend wounds of the living and the bodies of the dead to not decay away.
Yeah, and that really requires a lot of like truthful information about the physical world where we live to be able to do that. So they were really grounded, it seems, in that sense. That kind of proves it.
Yeah, I think so too. That they really must have been very grounded regarding a lot of these things, like how um, I don't know. They had like a lot of these things, I guess, really figured out, and it's like the yeah. I was just thinking, I don't know, like if you know that maybe Anastasios about the sacred baboons. I think the sacred baboons were the scribes of Thoth. Am I correct there?
I think yes, and also Thoth appear, I think, in one aspect as a baboon, as a white baboon, but I'm not sure.
I think I think Joe Rogan could learn a bit about that, about the sacred baboons.
He would be proud. It would be the intellectual side of Joe Rogan. And it is interesting that in China also there is the white ape, like in its tradition, like a being that comes very prominent with the form of the ape. Some have it as Sun Wukong, some have it as the progenitor of men. But it is interesting, like there is this connection of ape being able to learn and have great potential in the future. Maybe it could connect also with the full archetype in a sense.
That makes a lot of sense with like Thoth, but also like Hermes connected to that as well. And I guess this trickster element, it's like the trickster cycle, in a way. Well, like what Carl Jung talked about. There's like these different cycles and like the hair and all that on, and the hero, and maybe in a way that with Thoth and these different myths they kind of had that, I guess. To quite a degree integrated as well. I mean, if they get all the way up there to like Ma'at and this kind of like understanding, I do think they probably were kind of like very integrated people to be able to, yeah, that they figured this out. So they, like, yeah, what you said, Lynn, like they needed to be very embodied then, or they must have been very embodied for all of this to figure that out, or maybe like in general. I mean, I can't speak for all the Egyptians, but in general, it seems like embodied enough to like keep this thing going for a very long time. They had like their intermediate periods where things were falling apart for a while, but then they would always reassemble and always get back together, and Ma'at was there like crucial in that, this idea of the two lands. It's like, God, we need to like work together. We need to like get back together because otherwise we're fucked. Kind of idea seems to be like important in that. It's like, it's very like, yeah, awesome.
Yes, it is very cool. And right now that I notice, Konsu, his scepter, has the same symbol, this spine-like aspect on the top that has a head similar to Set, is the same scepter Ptah holds, and also it is the same scepter that Osiris holds. And I think it is a masculine symbol in the hieroglyphics that has to do with standing something, but it is not completely understood. As you have most female figures holding Ankh, that is considered as the giver of life, but again, it is not completely understood from what I know. And these two kinds of instruments are also archetypical in like in Egyptian culture. You see them all around and held by different deities.
Yeah, Osiris in the underworld also kind of like makes me then feel, or like connects to like, I guess, night too. Like night is also like often connected to that. So it's like this link, I guess, really makes sense.
I'm thinking now on the symbol they hold. I try to remember like the original meaning of it. If you see Thoth, he holds only the single scepter with the head, whereas Ptah holds the spine one. It is some kind of like symbols that depict these gods' powers. Maybe one shows structure, the other like the craftiness, most possibly.
I mean, in that sense, I don't know. Like Konsu makes me also kind of with like, with the similar. I don't know. Maybe he's like also like a more like. There's a certain like order element to it, but also like same with like I guess Osiris, like kind of like representing the I guess the past in some sense, where like Horus represents the future and but also like the I guess as this like divine child element and like in the beginning of the myth too, like the potential in that and I don't know. I would kind of like also say that like because he's connected to like the black soil of the river Nile. It's maybe in that sense also the potential that lies in there in that fertile soil in of itself.
Yes, Osiris also, not Osiris, like Horus, exist like on the side of the heads of many pharaoh statues. For example, you see him like giving counsel, a hawk, to the ear of the pharaoh, like attributing him with good governance and counsel. And when the pharaoh dies, they symbolize it like the hawk has flight, like the hawk that was guiding them through life as a ruler, now flied away towards the sky, going back to the heavenly source, together with the soul of the pharaoh. There is this symbolism.
For the entire episode, please check out the description or click on the end screen. And maybe see you next time.